Hi, welcome everyone in the Del Mar Center Hall. On Zoom, and for those watching later on YouTube. This is the first hybrid meeting of the Sea Ranch Forum. And today our guest is going to be Menka Sethi, our new community manager. So for those of you who have not heard of the Sea Ranch Forum, it has an illustrious history that goes back nearly 50 years. And we had a pause of the Sea Ranch Forum for the last couple of years, and we are fortunate enough to have the last co-chairs of the Sea Ranch Forum, Lee and Lori Mueller, here, and they're going to give a brief history to start out about the Sea Ranch Forum for those who have not heard of it before. And I'm going to share my iPad over to have them record and then speak to the people here as well. Speak.
Oh, I speak. I see. I'm in a little corner over here.
Yep.
So all of us have to get adjusted to this new high-tech and sometimes awkward transition. So yes, Lee and I were involved with the Sea Ranch Forum for over 10 years. And as Linda mentioned, the Sea Ranch Forum has been in existence for nearly 50 years. At first, in the early 70s, a group of sea ranchers felt that they wanted the opportunity to speak and discuss issues in a more informal setting than the constraints of a formal board meeting. So at first they met in private homes, in members' homes, but as the interest grew, they decided to make the forums public, and they formally established the Sea Ranch Forums in 1974. And it was a public member-run venue to provide a discussion of issues of interest to the Sea Ranch community. And we've estimated that at least 300 forums have been held, and certainly 200 in the last 20 years. So, and in recent years, I might mention that Walt and Nancy Custer, who were longtime forum participants, recorded, made DVDs, and many of those are at the Sea Ranch archives if you're interested in seeing some of the old Sea Ranch forums. Let's see, I wanted to mention also that the Sea Ranch Forum has always maintained its independence from the association. Throughout the years, however, a lot of association staff or committee members also participated in the forums. But it often served as an informal town hall to discuss issues. And the speakers and topics were always chosen by the members who were part of the Sea Ranch Forum organizing group. So with that, I'm going to turn that over to Lee, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the topics.
I feel funny talking to an audience behind me, but
Well, you can stay.
we're adaptable. I want to talk a little bit about some of the general subject areas and specific forums that dealt with that, to give you a sense of the scope of interests that brought people here for these forums. First topic is health. Mona Hobson of the RCMS gave a talk here on the aging mind and dementia. It was the largest crowd we've ever had. It filled the room and spilled out into the porch. Nature, we had cougars in our midst as a topic. It brought a large crowd, and I think there was an upsurge in the purchase of trail cameras after that. Sea Ranch history. We had Reverdy Johnson, who, as a young man, recently out of law school, wrote our CC&Rs, and they have proven to be remarkably durable and effective. That was quite a coup for a young fellow. Sea Ranch landscapes. We had stewardship of the landscape and the Commons Landscape Management Group. We also did the story of sheep grazing program at TSR, and our shepherd Leland Falk, who's very tall and very humorous and wry in his comments. If you haven't heard him and he comes back, you'll enjoy it. Issues, we had one on Burbank housing, and that storm has subsided, but it was quite a hot topic for a long time here. Regional governance. We had meet the County Board of Supervisors for the 5th District, speak to us and let us get acquainted. For the Coast Life Support District, we hosted a forum on the parcel tax increase that was needed to enhance and maintain the quality of service and lend some support to our CMS. The formation of the new fire district, North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District, was also introduced at a forum to talk about why we needed it and why we needed community support. Regional preservation included talks on Mill Bend, the acquisition of the estuary lands, and the work of the Redwood Coast Land Conservancy and others who got into that. And Preservation Ranch, which was an upstream development of some significance with, as you might imagine, various points of view on its goodness or badness. And the Sea Ranch governance, another area, how the budget is prepared, disaster planning, meet the TSRA candidates at a candidates forum, and of course, meet the community manager, which with John Fox and then Frank Bell, and today Menka Sethi, and there's lots more, but it's time to go back to Linda and our guest. Thank you. I should mention there are several past members of the forum here. Lori and I did not do that alone.
Right, but when Lori and Lee, after a decade, wanted to retire from doing it, no one stepped forward. And then we had COVID, and that changed things a lot. And so I actually was a guest of a forum years ago, and so I was familiar with it, and I wanted to interview the Sonoma County Sheriff's candidates, and I needed a platform to do it, so I wasn't just a nosy voter wanting to ask pointed questions. So I cast about, and Marty Campbell helped to make me think of trying to resurrect the Sea Ranch Forum. And I will be working with Linda Kennedy of the Archives Committee. I haven't gotten them yet, but I'm going to try to start getting some of the DVDs and then change those so they'll be available on YouTube. So it'll be easier to access.
That would be great.
Right. And so, yes, traditionally the Sea Ranch Forum did the candidates forum. They're now doing it under the Elections Committee, and maybe going forward, if we get everything up and going, then they may want it going back to us. So anyway, okay, that's the history of the Sea Ranch Forum. Okay, there's a lot to it. So now, Menka.
Sorry, I'm late.
Oh. So yes, a little late, but we're glad you're here. And one of the technologies that Menka and I are going to be going back and forth, muting and unmuting, And if there's any feedback, it's like, it's fumbling because the high tech hybrid thing that we paid money for in the hall isn't working as advertised. So we're doing something a little less sophisticated. So anyway, Menka, you started at the beginning of the year at a new job and you were all excited and you started working and getting to know people's name and the staff and the office, and you had things on your calendar, and then a bomb cyclone, category 3 hurricane without a name hit us on January 4th. And whatever you had on your calendar for the rest of the week probably didn't get done. And we could start in a regular interview with her talking about regular normal stuff. But to me, this is the elephant in the room, because she came in and it was a disaster in the whole region, in the counties around us and such. And you stepped up and became our leader, both there and also emotionally, by sending us info alerts on a daily basis. And I just want you to talk about that at first before we get into other mundane things. So I'm going to mute myself so you can unmute your.
Thank you, very kind. I guess the first response I would have is, I didn't start the recovery or the diving into the storm. I think we started together. And that was the beginning of the journey. I remember coming in Wednesday morning on the 4th, and the power was out, and school was canceled. These are my 2 fascinating creatures over on the left here, freaking me. They go to HorrorCon. And we didn't really have time to think about what to do. So our friends and neighbors, Debbie, who's here, took care of the fascinating creatures, and the department heads and staff just came into a room, and all barriers broke down. Community people I'd never met or had met once or twice before. Like Marty was a true gem, just called up and said, how can I help? And the board, Mark's here, opened houses for the hotels were all packed. They were taken up by emergency response crews. So it was really, on one hand, yeah, it's awful to start during a crisis, and it's awful to see the human impacts that played out. But as far as like starting in a new leadership role, the lessons learned, the opportunity to bond with the team, to do that in a way where the trepidation and the nervousness just wasn't there, because you didn't have an opportunity to be like nervous, right? You just had to get the work done and keep people safe. So it was really a beautiful entry from that perspective. And the team was able to bond in ways. I've been part of leadership teams before where everyone has been incredibly brilliant. And we had coach after coach to try and get us to gel. And we never got to the point of gelling. And one thing I can say about the TSRA staff is it is a cohesive team. And I just, like, my heart melted seeing that, because it's not, you can't take that for granted in the workplace. So I think I really found out what an amazing team I had stepped into, what an amazing community that was there to help everyone along the way. And then also, because of there's been lots of discussions. In fact, we just had budget workshop meeting about what we can do to be more prepared and more resilient in the future. One thing I do want to call out is how prepared we were for this storm. So I came into this, but there's a platform here of preparation already that the association had taken to allow us to not only respond for ourselves, but to partner with public agencies. And actually last week we had a debrief with the county, and we had actually on Tuesday, George Callis was in talking on communications, and someone knocked at my door and said, oh, FEMA, the governor's office, and the county are here. Like, great. And we dropped everything and spent 2 hours. And they wanted to come see the damage for a variety of reasons. But one of the reasons they wanted to come see the damage is because we responded so well. And at the end of the debrief with the different agencies and a call that followed, we were called out as, I quote, the shining star of preparedness on the North Coast. Yeah. And we found out on Thursday because of our, and just to tell you how amazing our team is, and you can't tell by the building looks a little decrepit. I hear that all the time, by the way. I'm still really proud of the building. I'm an architect, so, and might have little furry creatures as my roommates in my office. And that's okay because it's still charming and we'll work on it. But it doesn't mean we don't have a really technically sophisticated staff housed in that building. For example, all of our emergency responses, when any one of you called in during the storm, our team logged that call, incorporated it into ArcGIS, like an open source database that we could share with the county. We were able to share the data output of that with the fire protection district. So it was that type of effort that allowed us to track all the different incidents that happened, all the different damage that's happened. That actually, the reason the governor's office or administration came to Sea Ranch is they were lobbying the federal government to get us to the county to a higher level of emergency declaration disaster. So we found out Thursday, the county achieved that. So we're really, and I'm really proud of that because the public agencies would not have known about that damage had our team not done such a good job of recording that, and we're all going to benefit as a result. So I think those are some of my high level takeaways. Happy to dig in if anyone has questions. I'm still looking for a photo documentation of before and after pictures. So if you have good ones, send them our way.
So
I'm sorry, I may have not unmuted. Okay, sorry. I'm trying to work with this. And so the first hour is going to be me asking Menka questions, and then we'll take a bio break. And then we'll come back and we'll have questions from the audience, both in person and on Zoom. And it might be easy for those who are watching this remote to type your questions in the chat, because the audio may be difficult, and we're going to have our tech guru, Phil Loduca, also known as DJ Phil. If you're doing it verbally, he may be listening to your questions and say it aloud so everyone can hear it, okay? So it may just be easiest and fastest for you to put it in the chat, and he's going to balance the in-person and remote audience questions, okay? So, yeah, that was the disaster. It was like, yeah, and I had other questions for you. Okay.
So Linda, there's a quick question for the people back in here. Everyone here, Linda and Menka.
Yes.
Good. I'll try to speak up more. Okay. So you mentioned that you're an architect, and you first heard of Sea Ranch in architecture school. And then you came here, and I'm curious what it was like with your expectations of what you thought it was going to be like versus what you saw. Both, the buildings and the landscape and the wilderness and everything. Just tell us that from what you were anticipating versus what you saw.
Okay, how about now? Am I open? Okay, so yes, the buildings were as I expected them. I did not anticipate how beautiful the coastline was. It was hard to see that in pictures. And then the most beautiful part is the community. And that is, we didn't even touch upon the people. We touched very theoretically on the relationship between humans and nature at the broadest level. I had no idea what it would be like to live here. And I had no idea that our family would be moving from Palo Alto in Silicon Valley to the Sea Ranch because it's more diverse here than it is there. So that my kids could go to the school here. We went from a top 5 elementary school in the state to Horicon, and they're plugged in. So they're thriving, and the reason they're thriving is the relationship to nature. I would call it community resiliency. We have a community here of friends and family that is much closer at a deeper level than we have in other places we've lived. And my boys have classmates who are diverse in every sense that we just didn't have before. So that was the piece that didn't get touched on at all. And I didn't have any expectations, but it's the most pleasant surprise about being here. Mute.
I discovered that my iPad does not have a total mute function or sound thing. So when you were talking, I was getting feedback, and I don't know if that was on the thing for the people on Zoom or not. So when you're speaking, I have to leave the audio so that it doesn't hear that. Okay, so kind of question is you
I
talked
know, I can
about,
only see her face.
there's
Oh, no.
other
There's
people that are talking that are
lots of
on
people
Zoom.
online.
Can you mute them?
I just did.
Thank you. Okay, because you're not recognized to speak at this point in the meeting. Okay. Okay, so you talked about your family moving from Palo Alto to here, and I know in your introduction that was sent out, the info alert about having a new community manager, it was mentioned that you came here because of the schools. And I thought maybe you should touch a little bit more about that, because I know both you and your husband have become involved with the Horicon schools before you really became involved with the Sea Ranch Association community as well. So I just thought maybe you should touch on that first before we get into your resume.
Okay. Yes, we did get very actively involved in the community first through Horicon, probably out of necessity. It certainly wasn't intentional, but if you have kids in school, it's easy to focus on their time and their activities. So I think that was a natural inroad. I think you'd asked me before to tell me the story of why they wanted to go to Horicon. It's kind of poetic. And my oldest, when he was 10, sat my husband and me down and said that he would like to go to school in the country for 3 reasons. 1, it was quiet. 2, he could hear the ocean. And 3, he could do some writing. And so I think when I heard that, it's really hard to say no to that coming from a 10-year-old. So that was the reason that we decided to move here permanently. And then since moving here, I have a background in, I build housing. I've tried to not build housing for 20 years in California, whether it's affordable, market rate, for-profit, not for profit, all the above. And the school was going through a bond issuance process. I think I saw Paula's here, kind of stepped in and guided us through this, but there was a new innovation that I had been a part of a few years ago. I had a brief stint in tech. I worked at Facebook, now Meta. I led their effort to invest $1 billion to address the affordable housing crisis. And one piece of that work was to really focus on developing workforce housing for teachers. And we had piloted one of the first approaches for 22 teachers in the Menlo Park, East Palo Alto area. So when the Horicon bond came up, my husband was on the school board and was chatting about this. I knew it was possible to use those proceeds for workforce housing. It had been done twice before in the state. It hadn't been done in a rural area. So I got sucked into that effort, and due to Paula and Debbie and a whole bunch of my kids making buttons and a whole bunch of efforts, it passed. And thank you to everyone who voted for that. It actually passed the highest school bond passage rate in California last November, 80%. So that's how we got sucked into Horicon. And George Callis, yes, George did the Sea Ranch, Day in the Life of Sea Ranch. The Sea Ranch Life. I think we were episode 11 or 13. And so the bond includes facility upgrades for the school, and then a quarter of the proceeds will go towards workforce housing for the school. Yeah. So I think it's one of the more elegant ways from a funding standpoint that workforce housing can be built. And it's a way for employers to increase the housing supply in the area. So it's a powerful tool. There's only been a handful of test cases. We're certainly, I think, the smallest. We're certainly the most rural. So I think other areas like us will be able to learn from us and hopefully use as a roadmap to do more. Switch, okay.
Okay, so talking about your employment with Facebook, and you had other unconventional background for community manager, doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's different experience. And I know that you were one of 5 people that were your resumes were given to the board to look at, and it wasn't you've been a community manager before, and it was like, but you've got background with housing, and housing in the coastal community here is a big challenge. And you have architect, and it was like, in architecture is such a big thing, a Sea Ranch and the design committee and such. And other things. It's like, I wanted you to just talk about some of the things on your background and resume that will bring different experiences to this job that otherwise we wouldn't necessarily have if you weren't this incredible unicorn that came out. So, okay, we'll switch now.
Thank you. You're very kind in your description of my background. For full transparency, it was October, and my husband and I were at our kitchen counter with my in-laws who were in town at that time from Louisville. My father-in-law is always doing this on the computer, and somehow got a hold of the community manager posting, and he said, "Hey, there's a job here locally," because at the time I was working at a startup and the travel was getting pretty tough on our family. And I thought, oh, that looks kind of interesting, the background. I have some skills that might apply. So I crafted an email. I sent that down. I was here. My husband was next to me. My mother-in-law was next to him. And my father-in-law was next to him. And I think it took about 20 minutes. I wrote this cover letter email. I had my stock resume, and it went from me all the way down the line. By the time it got to my father-in-law, he's like, would you actually take this job? I'm like, well, of course I would. So he retypes my email and he sends it back down to me. But anyways, by the end of the night, the application was in. I had no expectation. I didn't give any thought to it. And then the next morning, the recruiter called and said, "We just closed the period for candidates. Can you talk at 11 a.m.? And long story short, I think it was 3.5 weeks later, I had an offer from the board. So it was all very fast. It was not premeditated. And I think the parts of my background that I got questioned a lot on, were one, I'm not totally new to HOAs, building housing in California, condos, and single family home and everything in between. I have created HOAs. I've put in place the management structures, the documents, the rules and regulations, have not managed one. So I was just very transparent about that from the start. There's not much I could do about not having had that experience. I have led organizations in the not-for-profit sector and in the for-profit sector. In startup world, I've spent a few years since Facebook. I was the chief operating officer of a lithium ion recycling company. I pinch hit as the COO at Marin Agricultural Land Trust. That was a nonprofit. And then most recently back to housing, I was the chief business officer at a venture-backed startup trying to, sorry, these are really wonky words, but I'll spit it all out, decarbonize the multifamily sector. So we were building prefab mass timber apartment buildings. It was really exciting. The impact, you can't get to decarbonization or meet the Paris Climate Accord goals, unless you tackle the residential sector. And I think this was a key way to go about it. But then this job happened and it was the opportunity to have local impact and address some of the same issues. To your point, housing supply here is a key issue. Resiliency, like how do we evolve the principles of the Sea Ranch while addressing climate change together? What are all the creative different funding approaches that we can take to that, apply towards that? And given that at this point, the crisis is so severe from a resiliency and an infrastructure investment standpoint, that funds can, I think, there's a lot more public funding available for this. We're just a lot more cognizant. A lot of HOAs have gone after that type of funding. It's going to be a really interesting opportunity for us, and we're certainly not going to let it pass us by, and we're going to do everything we can. So I think some of that, and I had experience previously, one of the other items I was asked about, had I had experience getting grant funding from public sources. And at the battery company I was at, I put in place the groundwork to get, they announced a couple of months ago, President Biden himself, it's a $115 million grant to scale battery recycling in the United States to increase resiliency of supply chains. While I was at Facebook, I helped write some of those public funding streams. So it's something I'm really passionate about, the marriage of the public and private sector to further these broader goals. I think of any community, definitely in California, arguably on the West Coast, arguably nationally, has the narrative, the design, like the illustrious design background, a mission that really puts humans and nature harmoniously together, that is more important now than it ever has been before. The nexus of those opportunities and challenges that we face here, I think are worthy of a lot of focus so that other communities and parts of the country can scale. So I think that was, but you can ask Mark Hughes on the, he put me in the hot seat. Other things, my background that were important.
Yeah, okay.
And it has to in a good way. Yes, I appreciate it. Actually, Marty was on my interview panel. I'm noticing all the. Yes. I'll mute. I'm muting. As the polite reminder.
Okay. I wanted to say that in reading some of your messages on the weekly info alerts, they're very heartwarming, and it's a wonderful community building exercise, and I invite you to do that, forever. I was the chair of a writers club, and so I had a monthly newsletter, and I would do a column for that. And when I got done with my stint, the incoming president was like, well, you can continue that if you want. I'm like, that's okay. You can do it now. But there was something that I remember you saying, that you wanted to lead with empathy first as a leadership philosophy. And that's a term that's not thinking out of the box and all this regular corporate speak. I mean, if it is, I haven't heard it yet, and I'd like to hear it more. But I'd like to hear you talk about what you mean by empathy first, and I'll mute myself now.
Okay, empathy first. What did I mean when I said that? Empathy is a tool I've learned, especially in the last couple of years, trying to navigate leadership roles in COVID, where we can't interact with each other. I think humans are meant to interact with each other, and we've been pent up behind computer screens. When you try and have discussions, they don't go so well because you can't like read the other person's face. You can't read body language. So the cues that we have just make it really hard to understand the person you're talking to. So I've had to over-index, being a lot more intentional, putting myself into the shoes of whoever I'm talking to really get to common ground. So the other trend that I've seen across my roles in the past couple of years is true divisiveness. And that was, I think I've lived here as a member over the last couple of years, and it was a bit traumatic. I watched on the sidelines, and one of the roles I held at MALT, the Agricultural Land Trust, when I joined that role, 2 weeks after I joined as a COO, the person who hired me, the CEO, left, and the staff went through a lot of turnover. There's turnover on the board, and it was just a deeply traumatic time. And it was very emotional. So the way I led through that was to listen a lot, and to really try and feel what the team was going through. And I think it was through that effort of trying to not only just like hear rationally, but to recognize emotion, intuition as a complementary data set to what I was hearing rationally, and to put myself in the emotional shoes of the other person, allow me to break down bridges and communicate in a really difficult time, to get to a way forward to start repair. I think that experience, we certainly talked about in my interview process, and it's something that I still see with the staff. They're still going through a healing process. And to gain the trust of the staff and rebuild that, certainly having to, hear the experience, do a lot more listening. And then also, I'll say almost across the board from members, I'm getting, and I didn't expect the impact of the communications. I will just say that. The reason why I did daily info alerts in the storm and cross post and all the different lists, and I think Jay posted on Slack and I posted on Facebook, was more tactical. How are we going to reach everyone? Because we know our database is not perfect. So it was just like a scatter shot. These aren't even our own channels, but it doesn't really matter because we have to keep people safe. So we're going to send this information out. And then along the way, I had the opportunity to, someone introduced me to Frank Bell. That was really lovely. Got to hear conversation on how he communicated. And during the interview process, I received the book of Frank's, his bulletin articles. And I think I just really enjoyed that, because I come from Minnesota, where I grew up in the same town that Garrison Keillor is from and based Prairie Home Companion on. So I really relate to that. So all of a sudden the info alerts became this opportunity to start to show up who I was as a leader. And I didn't have time really to craft my voice, which turned out to be beautiful because I could just show up as who I am. So I feel really blessed that you're getting to know who I am off the bat. There's not really a filter because I didn't have any time to create a filter. We just had to go out with it. So here's what you get. And I'm not perfect, so give me feedback. And once that happened, the number of emails I've gotten, I wrote about it in this week's info alert and outreach to I have not felt heard in years. Can I please talk to you? Can I please go on a walk? It's been overwhelming. And for me, it's joyful. I love people. That's one of the reasons why I took this job, the commitment to not only the place, but absolutely the people. Otherwise I wouldn't, be here doing this. It's what's most meaningful to me. So that was a roundabout answer to your question. But how does that work? Okay.
Okay. It is a little before 2, and I want to be cognizant to give the membership enough time to ask you questions, and we've gotten through all the questions that I had prepared. So let's take like a 15-minute bio break, and you can pause the recording so we don't. Welcome back, everyone. And so now comes the question and answer period with Menka, but the questions are coming from the members and not just me. So I'm going to start here, and we're going to try this, having someone ask a question here, standing up or sitting down, doesn't matter. And then I will restate it for Menka, and then we'll try to go back and forth, and Phil will tell me if there's someone. And so at home on the Zoom, it might be easiest if you have a question to type it in the chat. Otherwise, it'll be Phil listening to you and then having him restate your question as well. But either way, so first I'm going to ask, who has a question here? Raise your hand. Oh, okay, sir, ask a question and I'll restate it.
I've always been on track to have security return to when we initially bought our house here in Sea Ranch, have security round the clock. There was a shift from midnight to 8, and not that they'll, scare away a burglar, or, but at least we have someone on the property. And I'm sure there would be someone from Point Arena, from Sea Ranch, from Valhalla, wanting to take that shift with full-time security. And I think we can well afford it. Thank you.
Okay, so he was asking about security when he was here before, or years ago, when there were shifts that were from 12 p.m. to 8 a.m. And I just have a question. How long ago was that? And that was that 24/7?
That's
Okay.
right.
How long ago was that there?
More than 10 years.
More than 10,
Oh,
Less, yeah,
less than 10 years ago, we stopped having 24/7.
About 5 years.
Okay, so the question to Menka is, if you think there's money in the budget for that, and we just had this long involved budget workshop this morning that was supposed to be over at 10:30, which was on the agenda, and that's not when it ended. Just saying, if you think there's any interest in that, and I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, 24/7 security is not currently, for full transparency, in the budget for this coming year. And the board will be adopting it, and there's a process ahead in the coming weeks. So encourage feedback. That said, one of the lessons in the storm, I don't know if I wrote about this. I forget where I wrote about this. In the middle of the storm, a week in, we have on Wednesdays, we have a meeting with the full leadership team and managers. And I asked everyone, because we were in the middle of the storm, we were literally in the office with generators coming and going. And I don't think Delmar was operational because the rats ate parts in the generators, and that's a whole story. And the parts hadn't come in and the storm hit. So what are the lessons learned in the moment of the storm while it's still fresh? That's a really rich list of opportunities that surfaced at the last board meeting in my storm impact report. One of the lessons learned was we need 24/7 response, especially in the time of emergency. And it just surfaced again last week. We had a couple water main breaks, which some of you may have been involved with, regrettably. And we had some glitches because when the breaks occurred after hours, and our response was less than stellar, and again resurfaced this need for 24/7. And it's typically the security crew that doubles as emergency response intake during that time. So it is absolutely on the lessons learned list, and we do have to plan for it in some way, shape, or form. And we're going to have to figure it out. The one commitment I did make in the budget process is typically it gets shoved to the end of the year. So I understand for adoption in at the end of Q1 the following year, because our fiscal year is June 1. And I've committed from the staff perspective, at least to start that process at the urging of board, which I appreciate, soon after adoption of this budget. So that means around April. So all those discussions will start to kick up, and we're gonna get really serious about that particular issue. So I appreciate the question. I actually didn't know that we had 24/7 security previously. I'm seeing lots of heads nod.
So Bill?
Oh, I'm gonna go on mute. Okay.
Okay, yes. So Robert, go ahead and ask your question if there isn't anyone in the Zoom.
So you described kind of the silver lining of parachuting in right before the bomb hit, and the bomb hitting you and the staff, and all the good things that came of it. Are there, Sea Ranch wide, either culture or systems or people or members related silver linings that have come from this horrible storm that you're aware of, or you're focusing on, or can use to take to the next step and next level for us as an association?
So to restate for the recording, Robert Goldberg wanted to know about a silver lining when someone was parachuting down into a storm and how you are taking the silver linings from what you learned from this experience.
Okay, so I think if I don't answer your question fully, like, let me know, because I think what I heard is, what are the silver linings? What I thought I was going to hear was, what's everything that went wrong that we have to fix? So I can do that too at some point. And the silver linings are how prepared we were in terms of communication. And that means how connected we were within our own team and within the association, within the water company, and then within Sea Ranch Connect, and then the cross connectivity across all that. And then how good our relationships were, thanks largely due to staff and the members, with CAL FIRE, with North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District, with the county. And it's those relationships that helped us get through as well as we did. And then the other piece, I guess the parallel in tech is like open source or crowdsourcing, was really the ability to take relationships that we collectively had and use them to the association, the membership's benefit. Because no one person can have those relationships. The staff itself didn't have those relationships. It was really the collective and the ability to take that person saying, hey, I know this person, and then someone reaching out and saying, that person, how can you help us? And they stepped right in. And so it was kind of like a team effort, truly. That was the biggest silver lining. And I think that's why the county supervisor Hopkins, I have to chat with Linda and our scheduling, would like to come meet the membership in person to hear directly what the county can do, what it has done, what we would like it to do. And then the emergency preparedness staff, Marty, this was the phone call to you that we haven't made yet, would like to come and assess our facilities because of how well we provided for our community and how we enabled some of the neighboring communities through the partnerships with CAL FIRE and North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District, to the point where they may be wanting to invest in us to be able to do more. So I think that's a huge silver lining. It's definitely unique for an HOA. Yeah, does that answer your question? Part of it.
Does answer my question. So let me kind of focus or come down a little bit more, if you don't mind. So as an HOA, both as a membership writ large and also as a board, I think there's a lot of divisiveness and uneasiness about the Central Forest and about the airport and just interpersonal relations and so forth and so on. So I'm wondering, is there a way to leverage all the goodness that came out of people coming together and pulling together at various levels of the organization, volunteers and otherwise, including staff and other agencies, to like bring us together to actually meet somewhere where this is a better place for humans to live with other humans as opposed to just the natural setting.
Got it. So the dynamics and the type of conversations are being had versus like some of the divisiveness that we've seen.
Right.
Yes. So what my experience has been, what I'm seeing directly is the storm broke down barriers because we couldn't have barriers if we were actually going to help each other through. And in that moment when barriers were down, what I'm hearing are people felt like they could contribute. People felt gratefulness, whether it was for what a neighbor had done for them, whether it was because they could go get a cup of coffee in a facility we had open, or the smallest things. And then over now in the wake of the storm, because we had to go through with all these communications, it was more like lack of options. We have to communicate. There's no time to do fancy communications plan. We had to go out authentically. And that combined with the lack of the barriers, combined with these moments of gratefulness, I'm hearing receptivity and I'm hearing people reaching out who haven't felt heard in a really long time, now comfortable and safe again to at least make their opinions known. I'm also seeing a thawing in like being able to show up and say without fear of being, I guess, clawed at in return for saying what you really want to say. And it's not perfect. So I think we have this moment where people are starting to feel heard. We kind of just went through a community moment. Go back to the visceral, and I think I'm going to do all I can to make sure that people are heard. And that doesn't mean we have to agree, but kind of we have set a precedent, at least this year, where we can be kind to each other. We can say, I vehemently disagree with your viewpoint and you're a decent human being. And I'm going to treat you with respect. That's the sentiment that I'm seeing. There's a lot of work to do ahead, but that is my hope. I hear also even some of the more vocal, speaker uppers saying, whatever happened to this idea that it's okay to disagree and to have a good discussion. So I think I'm hearing it from all different perspectives, and I'm hopeful.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I have a question from Sharon Smith on the Zoom. She asks, have you considered using drones when storms that cause such damage and to help locate people who may be injured? For those of us who don't live here full time, it would be helpful to give property damage reports to the owners.
Are you going to repeat or can just?
Were you recording?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just respond.
Yeah.
Interesting question on drones. We had when in the heat of this or the peak of the storm, there was a moment of, I think the rain had parted for, 12 hours. It was one of those break days. And we thought, we need to go photograph the damage. We don't know when it's going to be useful. We need to get this done. And one of the photographers asked, oh, can I use my drone to fly it? And my initial response, I will admit, was, yes, absolutely, let's do that. And then Jay, who leads our comms, gave me the WTF part of my French look. Why did you say that? I'm like, what do you mean, why did I say that? We have a rule that there's no drones. He hotly debated.
Did you know that the damage assessment, we have a damage assessment group that covers the whole CMAQ, broken into neighborhoods, and we were out there, we walked all the properties and.
Yes, so thank you for.
Speak that.
Okay, so Adrian just mentioned the damage assessor crew that we have. So if you don't know, Sea Ranch is divided up into 20 different neighborhoods. Each neighborhood has a division leader. It's a volunteer who in times of emergency or in other cases will find people in that neighborhood, pull them together, reach out to them. And then there are volunteers who work with the division leader in their neighborhood. They're called damage assessors. So as part of this, the storm response effort and in the middle of the storm to do wellness checks, because we still have members who only have landlines and are hard to reach and are very vulnerable. So we leverage the division leaders and the damage assessors to go find people who needed wellness checks. We ended up giving food out to emergency rations to some members. I think that was on Info Alert. So the damage assessors, yes, went around and identified private structures that had damage on them, identified trees down. And it's actually that data that helped the crews get to the highest priority hazards that needed to be fixed. It helped us identify for CAL FIRE and others to places that needed to be addressed, high priority. And it also was the data that we fed into the state that helped get the new emergency declaration for the county. So it's incredibly important work. Yes.
Okay, hold on. Okay,
Mute.
Okay, so hi, Leanne Lindsay has a question.
I do. Well, actually, I wanted to just mention a point about communication and timing. She's my neighbor for a year across from where we both have offices at the Window Design and the Wine Gallery. I never had a chance to say much except some day, but I do film and voice production. But I also do voice over and work at the local public radio station. I volunteer there, along with Jean Berry of Sea Ranch and Roberta Chan of the Parks Department, along with Peggy Berryhill and Susan Rushmeyer who own the station. And it's an independent, small public media station in Walla, but we were doing our best for the whole time to be there every day, AM to 4 PM or so, and provide updates. So a lot of people are only getting their information, or it's one resource was radio, because AT&T was down and power was out. They could hear on the radio updates that we did. And we worked with the fire departments. And we were telling people, look, we've got these kits from the fire department to give out to the cold, we've got a blanket, a flashlight, batteries and that kind of thing that they were giving us to give out. And it did help a few of the neighbors. So I know it's a long thing to say.
I sort of feel like I need to bring this over to you, and because that's just too much for me to restate. So go ahead. So and look into it and
I'm used to cameras.
KGUA.
But no, I just wanted to thank you, Menka, for taking the job. And I finally get to say hello to you after being my office neighbor for so long. But being a volunteer at the radio station too, at KGUA, we were doing what we could to every day make phone calls to all the emergency people in the area to provide updates on everything that we could. So I just wanted to say it's part of the community here that is a service that we like to let people know about. So, and it's part of our emergency response.
So do you have a question in there?
No, I just wanted to say, that's why it wasn't a question. It was more of,
A public service announcement.
but
Okay.
I guess the question would be, more connectivity with the public radio station, more reaching out to provide information. That would be important. Yes.
Okay.
Noted.
If you want to say anything? Or
No, thank you for being here. It's great to see you again. And it's actually a really good call out. We could have used the public radio more. That certainly wasn't on our radar, literally. And it's a great opportunity ahead. So thank you.
Bill, do you have any questions?
Paula Smith. Hi, Paula Smith. I want to echo the damage assessor message, and I'm going to make a pitch. Susie Gilly needs help. Susie has done a wonderful job recruiting people, and she's one of the best people on your staff, and Jay too, and all the other people, but she needs help. She needs a new shelter manager. And here's the part of the pitch you're gonna love. The new shelter will be at the lodge. There's a bar. So if you're gonna crash and burn, it's the place to go. So, but she needs help with assessors. She needs a new shelter manager. She needs new help with medical. You've put some in the info alert. I just want to make a push that give her a hand. She does a good job. And I have a question on the info alerts, on the emergency ones. Apparently the Burbank people were not getting them because technically they're not part. Can we change that? Because they also have children there and mountain lions come down and they need to get the info alerts. That's all.
And the bear.
And bear, yeah, that's right. There's a bear too.
I'm gonna mute, or I'm gonna unmute and respond. Yes, that the lack of connectivity with Burbank families was one of the big gaps that surfaced during the storm. I hear you, and plans are in place. And then Susie Gilly is a star for sure. And I just have to, for those of you who don't know Susie Gilly, she leads our security. She at one point, she didn't sleep for days, literally. And at one point hadn't eaten for over 24 hours. And the only reason I knew that is I was eating my lunch and I could see she was at her off. And I asked, have you eaten? Because I was, and she looked and no, she hadn't even eaten. She didn't remember to like go home and eat. That's how dedicated she was to the job during the storm and to keeping all of us safe. So thank you for highlighting that. And she does need help. Noted. Thank you.
Yes. And she needs to eat. So, Phil, are there questions no questions from the audience on Zoom? Okay. Any more questions here? Okay, hold on.
I haven't met you yet personally, but I just would like to know, how would you like best for us to communicate with you? I'm on 2 small committees. I don't know if I should be sending emails with my concerns or something directly to you, or should I be, I don't know. How do you want to be communicated with from the members?
Hold on.
Go ahead. Back muted again. Okay, excellent. Oh, my hand is up. I'm asking to talk. Thank you for asking how, so the question is, how do I like to be communicated with? Feel free to call the office, leave a message, feel free to email me. My name's kind of funky, so if you can't remember my email address, you can always do cm@tsra.org. I have 91 unread emails right now, which is pretty good. So I will get through them. Eventually, I'm trying to be timely in my response, but I think I'm behind on a few who are in this room as well. So I will do it, but email or call.
So email or call.
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, Barbara Schultz wants it. What, is it short or do I need to bring it? Okay, go ahead.
So what can we do to help you? What do you need from the membership and from the board to really buoy your success?
Okay, so Barbara Schultz wants to know what the membership and the board of directors can do to help make your leadership a success.
I'll start with the members, well, and the board too. They're all I will have to say board members, I was terrified of meeting you before going into my interviews because I had heard Elizabeth is giving me the stink eye. And guess what? They were human. They were very charming. And so I would ask the same thing of the members from the board, which is, I believe that feedback is a gift. I am not the type of person who, if something's wrong, I don't take it personally. I see the world not as right or wrong. I see it as you're either right or you learn. And it's something I'm trying to pass down to our staff too, because I think some of the legacy culture is not that people are afraid to speak up. And what I've seen from that in the past is if you're not comfortable speaking up or voicing a concern, it stays inside and it germinates and grows much larger. So obviously, I'm always happy to hear like what's going well, but I really want to know what's not going well and what opportunities you see, what gaps you see. That's actually really helpful in terms of what we can do to, you know, provide members the best service possible, to help the board prioritize what the, you know, the policies are of the association. And then also one of the things I mentioned when I took this job was I wanted to be a conduit. I see three key constituents who I serve, the staff, the members, and the board. And because I'm a unique role at that exact nexus, that's a huge opportunity to share perspectives from one constituent to the other. So to the extent that, like, and perfect question, how do you communicate with me? Just like send me an email. If something's wrong, don't be afraid and like post it just like come to me. And I may not be able to do exactly what you're desiring. And I will absolutely hear you, listen to you, and do what we can and make sure that the voice is heard and passed into a place where action can happen. Yes. Oh, mute. Okay.
Okay, so who,
In the corner.
Krista, okay. Hi, Krista, hi. Is it Krista Lucy, is it a short question or do I need to? Okay, what's your question?
Welcome, and thank you, Menka. Disaster teams, how do we know who our disaster team person is in our neighborhood? I just think that would be good for everyone to know, and I don't know that.
Right, so Krista Lucy is asking about how to find out who is their disaster team leader. I happen to know because I am one of the damage assessors. I'm in Division 17, and I went around and looked around our thing, but it's like going, for those who don't, how do they know who their leader in their segment is their division?
Okay, I'm unmuting. It's an excellent question. And right now the answer is very nebulous. In fact, it was one of the gaps that we surfaced during the storm, because we had to update our rosters of who the damage assessors are, who the division leaders are, what is the updated contact information. So the next step, what we haven't done yet you'll hear is one of my favorite words, is to cascade who, exactly to your point, like to the neighborhoods, who is your leader, who are the damage assessors, and then also open invitation if you would like to take part and participate as well. And some of the we also have, and it's something I would like to cascade, certainly through our website, which is going through, you know, upgrades and looks more beautiful than it did in the past and still has some work to happen. It's also something that we don't yet do. I've been trying to wrestle down in info alerts. I would love to like highlight for this neighborhood, like this is the area of the neighborhood, so that I don't even know what neighborhood I'm in. I have to say that. So you know what neighborhood you're in, and then wouldn't it be awesome to see a picture of who your division leader was? Things like, so, and some of the tactical, you know, constraints that we're working through is, well, we don't send photographs through info alerts right now because it's not as mobile friendly with using the technology that we have. So Jay and who leads our communications efforts and a whole lot more in security and central services, has an amazing comms team right now that he's built up. So we finally have the resources to go do some of that. And I would love to showcase too, like to your point, the F&R crew, who is the F&R crew, showcase the individuals and the amazing work that they do. So there's a lot of work to move ahead. That's some of my favorite work, I have to say. So, okay, mute.
Okay, I see Steve Smith has a question. Is it short or do I need to bring my iPad? Short. Okay, he's indicating short. Okay.
We have made a lot of successful work between the various different departments on the coast, the various different agencies. And in fact, on one tree removal project, F&R was there, Walala Water was there, Caltrans was there, I was there, and I'm sure, and I think security was there also clearing one part of Highway 1. So we managed to do a lot of work with a lot of volunteer crew. What will it take for Sea Ranch to make use of those same volunteer capabilities?
Okay, so to summarize,
What will it
was
take?
not a short question because it was led up. And Steve is part of the North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District. And so brevity is not a short. So yes. So he was talking about that in working with other agencies and wanted, and he's a volunteer and many other people that are working for doing work with them are not paid. And he wanted to know what it's going to take for the Sea Ranch Association to try to leverage that. Yeah. Is that the question? Okay.
Okay, excellent. So before I answer your question, Steve, I have to tell you, you probably don't remember, but my boys and my husband and I met you at the emergency response. You were in front of your fire engine and gave boys a ride. And we were talking, somehow the Horicon school bond surfaced and you said, you have to meet Paula. I'm like, who's Paula? My wife. And then I met Paula in the bond passed. Yes. So I'm
All an iceberg here. It's all of us together. So it's not just me, it's not you, it's all of us. This is an iceberg. We live on a nice iceberg.
Summarize that.
Paula said we live on an iceberg. We are the tip.
Me, not me.
we not me. Actually, that was the perfect summary. Yes, that's true. We not me. And so to the volunteer effort, again, iceberg, that's such a good analogy. We have started to leverage some volunteer resources in wake of the storm damage. You'll have seen the Azalea Trail is cleaned up due to a great crew out there who's already helped us. And it's already helped us even in our budgeting, for example, for tree removal. The initial, we're kind of in a sprint to get a lot of the debris cleared up by fire season. Thank you so much. So that is the first thing that has to get done. There's a lot more fence repair, beach access repair, a whole lot more. But getting the wood debris removed is first priority by fire season. So initial contract, we don't have the equipment to do some of that. So we have to rely on outside contractors, but we are able to assist them. So long story short, the bids came in, it was like $300,000 because of the volunteer effort that helped us with the trail clearing and stuff, which our crew does spend a portion of their time doing. We're able to pull our crew time off of that for the next couple of months so that they could work alongside of our contractors with their big equipment, and we reduced that budget to half to get that into this year within the existing pots that we had. So we're starting to do that. The impediments to doing it more in the future are, again, this goes back to our team needs to know who can do that work and how to put them together. I think that's a coordination effort that we need to take on as staff and do it much more robustly. And then the other key constraint I'll just name is liability. I would love to have people go and like cut down logs and do that to help. But there's liability to the association too if people use chainsaws and things like that if they're not organized properly. Yes.
I always have to remind people when they say there's the liability of using volunteers. We have a volunteer fire department.
Yes. Fair
We
point.
respond to a lot more than just.
It's a fair point. Yes. Oh, so, yes, okay, so for those of you online, the response from Steve, which was very well on point, which the liability response to using volunteers, Steve is from the volunteer fire department, and they did respond to a lot of our emergencies in really dangerous situations. Thank you.
Anything from the, no hand? Susan had a question.
Okay, who,
Actually, it was a comment, and it was really on communication from like a committee to you.
okay,
And I thought, as a committee member on the Trails Committee, I'm not just gonna send you an email about my concern. It really needs to come to you from the chair of our committee.
okay, so,
And maybe not all committees work
Yeah.
that way, but that's.
so Susan, what's your last name? Susan Moore, okay, had made the suggestion because she's on the Trails Committee. She feels that that if she wanted to communicate something, she shouldn't write it directly to Menka. It should go through the chair of her committee. And she's suggesting to try to help your overfilled inbox so that it isn't just stuffed, helter skelter with. Right. She's not speaking for the whole committee, but she's trying to say that she would consider have it go through her committee chair.
Well,
So,
actually, when I was on the communications committee for a while, that's what we did too. We put it
Okay.
through the chair.
okay. And Leanne Lindsay is chiming in that when she was on the communication committee, that it would also go through the chair of the committee. So that's two different committee members. Thank you for your service. Had suggested to not have every person write to you directly. So anyway, that was a comment and not a question. So is there another question in the audience? Yes, Mark Godley has a question. Is this a short one or should I bring the iPad to you? He says short. Okay.
Menka, have you had a chance to think about what success might look like a year from now for you and your role, and for us as a community?
Okay, so he is asking for you looking forward a year from now, what success would look like for you as a community manager and us as a community a year from today, what that success would look like. And I'm going to mute.
Okay. What does success look like a year from now? I've gotten the 100-day question, actually gotten the year-long question. So I think success would be, I'm acutely aware like the lack of trust. I think there's still a lot of trust rebuilding going on. I mentioned staff members and board between those three constituencies. If there can be a much more trusting environment, and I think we're definitely on the path to that. But it's still like unstable days, right? We're still learning to trust each other again. So I think if a year from now, when we show up to meetings and we're just a little more like our shoulders are down a bit, we feel like safe to say, I totally disagree with what you're saying, like, what the heck, but blah, 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 blah. But like to still do it with kindness, I think that would be a huge success across all those three different constituencies. I think other success would be, come on, we have had projects that have been in the work for some of them like a decade, right? To get a couple of them across the finish line, can we update the fuels management plan in some way, shape, or form? Can we have a lot of different environmental plans that could be brought together and stuck. So I would like to see some of the major projects move ahead. And then a year from now, treasurer, healthier budget process where we can do, there's so many creative ideas I have heard from the members. We have a ridiculous brain pool among the members. I think, forget who it was, reminded me of one of the terms that I learned when I moved here was PIP, previously important people. And I was floored when I heard that. And it harkened back to when we would go to PTA meetings at my son's school in Palo Alto. We had Nobel Prize winners among the like parent population. And we have that same level of like talent here. There's so many different ideas when it comes to like, how can we fund the association so that we can accomplish, these really big efforts that we have ahead. I mean, we do have, it came up again and again today, right? Infrastructure deferral. Like we have, on one hand, our water company is the shining jewel of the North Coast. On the other hand, the infrastructure has not been reinvested in 50 years. So it is a ticking time bomb. So a lot of this is going to have to be reconciled. I think the only way we do that holistically in a way that really maximizes our collective talents and creativity is to have a healthier budgeting process. So that is, if that can be proven once in one cycle a year from now, I'd be pretty darn thrilled.
And unmute. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna say we've only got about 10 more minutes. So you asked a question before. So Dibby, do I need to bring the iPad to you or is, okay,
No, I just
it's a
have
short one.
comment.
Okay.
And it's two parts. One is that I was at the meeting today. And it was delightful to look at the chat and see no snarky comments.
Okay, let me
So that's
just,
a big
okay.
improvement.
So Dibby Tyler, getting the applause that you're hearing was said that when she was at was it the budget meeting or the board meeting or both?
Oh,
Both, that she was at the previous budget and board meeting this morning and she was delighted that there was not snarkiness in the chat. Yay.
so things
Okay.
are changing. It's
Some,
better.
yes. And the second thing is,
Okay.
okay.
Old brain.
Okay, sorry.
No, the second thing is that in terms of the benefits from the storm, we have eliminated a lot of dead and dying.
So she said a benefit of the last storm was that it got rid of a lot of dead and dying trees. Yes, yes. So was that it? Okay, thank you. Okay. Cynthia.
So in lieu of the storm and the resiliency of the coast, how do you view Sea Ranch being a leader for this part of the world going forward, being self-reliant? We, not me, sharing with beyond our borders, but solar, wind, so that we don't have power outages for 8 days.
So Cynthia Hogan was asking for resiliency and also for self-reliance of trying to avoid having weeks without power, and whether or not there's any way that we as a community can try to have, I don't know, a microelectric grid was not what she had mentioned, but I'm just extrapolating on that. So I will now turn that over to you.
So this is one of the topic areas that I get so excited about. And if we can get to, like the budgeting process I was talking to before, we can, it's going to require that we max out our creativity. It's also going to require that we work together productively, which gets back to like the trust building. But some of the ideas that I've heard today that I personally love, I love the idea of piloting and then scaling. So like pilot projects that we can kind of test and that we can scale. It's how in my previous work at Facebook, we got $1 billion for affordable housing because we started with a handful, 2 years basically worth of micro projects. And we tested out and we got different feedback from community. We documented the results and then went to the board and we were able to invest more because of the success. So I kind of see perhaps some of those type of efforts. Some of the ideas that have surfaced that I really love are pooling together of resources of the 50 homeowners to do solar individually and see if that could scale into something collectively. There's definitely differing opinions on should our homes even be allowed to have solar individually, or should we truly have like a community-wide energy generation, facility. So I think there's multiple different viewpoints. I would love, so I don't know what the answer is per se, but I would love that process to move ahead. Super fun ideas. I think it's just like tapping the surface. We have, one member here who is truly leading the industry nationwide on battery storage microgrids, as a member of the Sea Ranch. That seems like an opportunity that could be explored at one point as well. And then in terms of the financing, that I think we're super early days of how we can do that. We can do it from traditional sources. There's absolutely talk of like distributed finance approaches to this. I know there's a lot of interest for public sector funding of those type of programs. So it's interesting because on one hand, for us, it maybe a pilot scale is the entire community because the scale is being viewed as like the broader the state or the region. And because of who and where we are and our history, I think we might have some of those opportunities as well. A lot of that funding is being programmed and deployed as we speak. So it's time is of the essence. And I don't know how fast we'll move. And if we don't move, fast for the cycle, that's okay. We'll have time ahead. But those are some of the initial thoughts. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay, I'll mention, I'll recognize you in just a minute. But I want to say one thing to everyone. Anyone who emailed me to reserve an RSVP, thank you, because I didn't know if anyone was going to show, because we haven't had an in-person forum in a long time. And I was afraid there was going to be like 5 people and it was going to be kind of sad. So I'm glad, thank you for RSVPing. Anyone who did, I already put you on our newsletter mailing list. So if you haven't and you'd like to be on it, then Barbara has a sign up sheet up there with topics and such. And before I turn for a second question to someone, I have commitments from 3 individuals for future in-person forums. One is Supervisor Linda Hopkins, and we're going to figure out a day to work with her calendar and schedule. And I don't know, it may not be on a Saturday, depending on how things work. I don't know. I also have a commitment from Sonoma County District Attorney Carla Rodriguez and Sonoma County Sheriff Eddie Engram to do in-person forums. So, okay, your second question, go ahead.
Would you comment on the current status of the subsidized housing at the north end?
He wants a comment about the subsidized housing at the north end, which I think is Burbank, also known as Burbank. Okay.
I'll be brief. I'm happy to sidebar because as this is like I have to intentionally not spend time as much as it's a passion area. So happy to sidebar. And the state of Burbank housing is trying to figure out a sustainable financing plan for the apartments there. They have a couple options on the table that they are currently discussing with the families there. And my only request is it's a really scary time for the families in Burbank because of the state of the units and the uncertainty of the financing plan. So as much compassion as possible as our community can have for the families. I think that's really important right now. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Okay. So I want to say that I'm really glad that there hasn't been as much feedback and such. as it could have been, yay. And so we have one more question.
Anything about the golf course?
She wants to know about the golf course, and I will turn that over, but I also want to thank everyone for coming. And for those in the room, there's a tradition from the Sea Ranch Forum. Yes. Put your chair in the closet. Okay, for those who can, please do so. And so I will turn the last question about this. Oh, yes, there is a reception for those that are here. At home, you have to furnish your own, your nibbles and drinks. There is a reception sponsored by the Communications Committee in the Del Mar house, and that's from 3 to 5. So when we're down here, come on over and schmooze with Menka and each other. Yes, okay.
Okay, the question was future of the golf course. I do not know, and it's a good flag. And I'm actually a little like, my shoulders went up, not down when you asked the question, because I have yet to meet with Christina or David Helmer at the lodge. And every time I go into the lodge and I see Christina, I'm reminded that I have not met with them yet. So I need to do that, but I don't know right now.
I'm the head of the ladies golf group there.
Ah,
and,
okay.
We just did have a meeting and Adam at the golf course is still gonna be there. And he said with all the rumors flying around, with all the misinformation, anybody can call him and he'll give you what he knows. He and Christina we're looking at a 3-month closure, even though most people know. They're hoping it'll be shorter. They're just trying to find a way to break even. They had 14,000 rounds of golf last year and they need 20,000. They're not trying to make money, somewhere to break even. And they're working on some kind of a deal with the water because that's one of their biggest expenses with the city of Fall. So that's the latest from that.
So the response
As
to.
far as walking on the course, I think they said you could go out there and walk, but once again, I wonder about liability, because there's golfers out there still hitting the ball. They're gonna maintain the course minimally, because it would be too hard to bring it back after 3 months if they just didn't mow it. But just be aware that they do give you golf ball.
So high level response, talk to Adam. We heard there's a discussion between the women's golf league.
And the men's. They have
And the
a
men's
group
golf
with,
league.
A focus group,
Okay,
and they're meeting again on February 9th, so we might need, some more next week.
meeting again with the lodge on February 9th right now. with-
And then members of the community as well as all of it, because a lot of golfers from there.
Okay. So talk to Adam, will still be at the golf course. Golf course owners are trying to find a way to break even. They had 14,000 rounds of golf last year. They need 20,000 to break even, and they are trying to put a plan to sustainability ahead.
Thank you, everyone, and take your chairs, then go get some nibbles and drinks. Okay, bye.